right, so today we're focusing on Alundra Blayze / Madusa. Glenn, what matches are we going to be talking about?
We are going to be talking about the 1994 SummerSlam match against Bull Nakano.
Yeah.
April 3rd, 1995 match on Raw against Bull Nakano. And the WCW Madusa versus, I hope I don't say it wrong because we've gotten some hate in the comments.
Yeah.
Akira Hokuto.
We'll go with that. Let's just call her Akira because I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yeah, Akira's right. Yeah. At the 1997 Great American Bash.
All right, so SummerSlam 94. What can you tell us about this one?
All right, so I was trying to remember what match it was, and for some reason I thought the match was at WrestleMania, but there was an Alundra Blayze match this year, or 1994, that in the wrestling magazines at the time, a lot of fans, like in PWI and all that, writing letters and all that to these magazines, they debated that this match, I believe it was this match, I'm pretty sure it was this match because it was the best match between the two in 94, and they didn't wrestle at WrestleMania. So this match was believed by many fans at the time to have been a candidate, if not match of the year. Okay, so Alundra Blayze has been quoted as saying that her time in wrestling was the lost era of women's wrestling. We had Moolah's era that happened before for decades, and then women's wrestling petered out in both WCW and the WWE. Wound up having people like Madusa or Alundra Blayze, but Madusa in WCW, and Sherry Martel having to become managers during this time because there just wasn't women's wrestling. And so it was a shame. And because there was not a great women's wrestling scene at this time, there was a terrible underdevelopment of women's wrestlers at this time. Madusa, who had been to Japan where women's wrestling didn't take this nosedive, she would try to wrestle in the States, and she wouldn't have too many, high quality opponents. I saw a quote from her that said that the roster in the WWF was 2 wrestlers. Well, I mean, you did have Luna Vachon, and you did have Bertha Faye. I don't know who she was talking about as far as the second one. I'm assuming the second one was Nakano. But basically, the whole idea of bringing Nakano into the States at this time is because, at least according to the storyline, but also I think in reality, that they were having to import wrestlers from Japan to actually give Madusa, Alundra Blayze, good opponents. And we would see this happen in WCW too with Akira. And so women's wrestling in Japan never died out the way it did in America. And so this match with Bull Nakano, it was epic, and it was defining for both of them in American wrestling. Of course, they both had careers in Japan, especially Nakano. But it was a wonderful match. I can see why it would be match of the year. But actually, the second match they wrestled, even though it was a lot shorter, is my favorite match of the two. But either one of them are just great matches. They're legendary, and especially the SummerSlam 94 is just known as being legendary. So Alundra Blayze was defending the title against Bull Nakano. Most of the fans didn't really know who Nakano was. She had this crazy look about her, and with her hair standing up on her head, and like the face paint and everything, and like the unusual costumes, which was something that's very much part of like the Joshi wrestling and Japanese women's wrestling scene. She's bringing that over to America. This is the first time that American fans have seen this kind of stuff. And Alundra Blayze, of course, is the American competitor, and this was back in wrestling when they still would chant USA, USA, and all that kind of stuff. And I think when you watch that 94 SummerSlam match, you really need to pay attention to the fans. They barely knew who Nakano was. They knew a little bit about Alundra Blayze, and the fans were hyped about this match. I don't know if they were ready for what they were about to see. And it's kind of like what you said when you were watching the match on Raw just a minute ago. They wrestled as good as anybody else on the roster. That's not an insult to women's wrestlers because now they wrestle as good as anybody on the roster, if not better.
Right.
But back then, this was an unusual thing to see. It would be unusual to see women wrestle high quality matches until we got to the, Trish Stratus, Lita, Mickie James era of women's wrestling.
Right.
Prior to the Divas era, which Divas era, once again, took a nosedive. Not to say there wasn't great women wrestlers at the time, but overall quality suffered. That's the problem with women's wrestling in America, is when it was bad, it was bad. You could see that the strikes didn't look good. Everything looked like they were just lightly tapping each other with moves. And you didn't see that with Alundra Blayze and Bull Nakano. And that's especially relevant given the fact that women's wrestling was all but dead during this time. So we're going to fast forward to the April 3rd Raw, which if you're trying to follow these matches, unfortunately, this match has not been uploaded to Netflix yet. It was on Peacock. Yeah. No, now all the Raws are going to Netflix.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
So it's not on either one.
It was on Peacock.
Okay.
No longer on Peacock.
Okay.
And it's not been uploaded to Netflix yet.
Okay.
That I know of.
But it is on YouTube.
Yeah, it is on YouTube.
Yeah, okay.
This match showed something about women's wrestling that I've talked about today, and that I think right now women's wrestling is overall better than men's wrestling at this present time, and it's been that way for years now. And my reasoning for that is that women wrestlers today are more versatile. Okay. Let's look at Charlotte Flair. Charlotte Flair is strong physically. She can lift her opponents up with ease. She can do the technical wrestling with focusing on a limb. And, she's got the figure eight. She can do a moonsault off the top rope to the floor outside. So these women wrestlers are doing everything. Bianca Belair, look at her. She's extremely strong. She can do just about everything. And in this match, we see moves that weren't common at that time. I mean, Bull Nakano was over 200-something pounds. And this is back when they actually would announce women's weights during matches, which I thought, I've gotten used to that not happening, and it sounded weird. But Bull Nakano did a tope suicida.
Yeah.
In this match.
Yeah.
Okay? I know that's every moment of AEW, but but back then that was extremely weird. Especially to see someone that big doing a tope suicida. She did a moonsault off the top rope. Alundra Blayze, they were working as well as anybody else on the card possibly could work.
Yeah.
My only complaint about this match is that it was short, but they packed everything into a short match that had hardly a moment's break in the match. It was just they were, whatever time they were given, they were probably extremely underpaid at this point. They were probably only given a few minutes of the time. This match should have been the main event. This should have been the first time that women main evented Raw, but that wouldn't happen until later, until the Trish Stratus era of wrestling. And it was just an amazing match. And then we have the WCW match. Well, before we have WCW match, I guess if we're going to talk about Madusa, we got to bring up the trash can. I'm sure most of the people that are watching this have seen the clip. And unfortunately, it's the thing that's most associated with Madusa these days. She gets hired by WCW. She gets pressured by Eric Bischoff to dump the WWF Women's Championship into the trash. Bischoff has tried to play off how much it was his decision versus hers or whatever. But, I mean, you got to look at it this way. She's starting in a new company, and her boss is telling her to do this. Yeah. I believe that he told her to do it. I don't believe that this was her idea or whatever Bischoff has said about the situation. You start off with a new company. You're just trying to do a good job. You're doing what you're told. Even though this unfortunately got her blacklisted from the WWE for, I think, about 15 years. It really hurt her wrestling career. It was disrespectful, and it shouldn't have been done. And for whatever boost it gave WCW, it really hurt Madusa because she wasn't allowed back into the WWE until she went into the Hall of Fame. And that's when she brought the belt back out of the trash. Especially given how much Madusa, Alundra Blayze, had did to revive the women's division as much as she could, to then throw the belt in the trash. I mean, how could that have been her decision to do something like that? It wasn't. I don't know what she was dissatisfied with the WWF, but her WCW career wasn't all that great. I think her WWF career was was actually better. So this incident happened. Unfortunate. I hate it. You can watch it in the Raw versus Nitro Monday Night Wars episodes. It talks about it and read about it. It was just a terrible thing to do. And I blame Bischoff for it. The match that was really defining for Madusa was a belt versus career match. Madusa versus Akira, and I'm just going to say Akira after this, Hokuto. Okay. Akira comes out wearing this bizarre outfit with like a gas mask on her face. Once again, showing how in Japanese wrestling they did a lot as far as their outfits and gimmicks and stuff and, strange things. And
I also want to point out that she came out with Sonny Uno, who took a selfie with a disposable camera in 1997.
Yes, I noticed that.
I just want to point that out. In 1997, Sonny Uno took a selfie with a disposable camera.
Yes, I noticed that. I was like, did people do that back then?
Maybe Sonny Uno invented the selfie. I don't know.
Maybe so. I don't know. Sonny Ono, who was a manager for a lot of the Japanese talent that was coming in at the time. WCW has always been more open to having Japanese talent than the WWF had been. They wrestle a wonderful match, which ended in a shocking ending where Madusa had to retire at that point. Of course, in wrestling, a retirement match is never a retirement match. From my understanding, her career officially ended in the year 2000. So that never sticks in wrestling. But the match was just awesome. Probably her best match that didn't have Bull Nakano in it. Utterly enjoyed it. It was a shocking ending with Madusa having to retire. And, Madusa had her original American gimmick, with the American style. Madusa isn't Madusa from Greek mythology. Madusa was meant to stand for Made in USA. Madusa.
Okay. I did not know that.
You get it?
I get it.
It's a secondary type thing.
Yeah, okay.
That's an inside joke.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. It's a secondary type thing.
It's a secondary type thing.
I forgot about that.
Nobody's going to know what we mean by that, aside from maybe the guy that likes Vince Russo and maybe Tony, but he doesn't watch these.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a secondary type thing.
Yeah.
Madusa.
Yeah.
So that was the gimmick.
Yeah.
So, Lance, what did you think about these matches?
Continuing on the Great American Bash match, I really liked the angle they did with her knee and how they worked over her knee. Thought that was great.
She's holding the knee, and she can barely stand here.
After the match, Gene Okerlund even mentioned that's how Wendy Richter hurt her knee. Or that Wendy Richter hurt the same knee.
About 8 years ago, Wendy Richter blew that same knee out.
So, it was, that was a fantastic match. They were all fantastic matches. And like I said to you earlier, if you just go back and watch these matches are on par with women's matches today.
Yeah.
But you need to realize they weren't all like that. These really stood out. These were kind of rare because of the lack of women in wrestling, right? Yeah, they were just all fantastic. Go back and watch them.
Alundra Blayze had to wrestle Bull Nakano like 100 times.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't have anybody.
Right.
She wrestled Luna Vachon 100 times.
Yeah.
Not literally 100 times, but a lot.
Yeah.
If you look up Alundra Blayze's matches on Cage Match, like I remember seeing like 10 or 15 in a row that were against Luna Vachon. Mm-hmm. They just didn't have the competition.
Yeah.
Back then. And that's why Madusa called it the lost era. Probably a lot of things going on. I think women wrestlers get paid a lot more nowadays. Back then, they were probably getting paid jobber wages because wrestling has been infamous for underpaying female talent. It's gotten better from what I can tell. The wages that Nakano and Vachon and Madusa and Bertha were all getting paid was probably criminal, especially considering the level of matches that they were having. And then the other thing that was criminal was the lack of TV time women's wrestling was given.
Yeah.
It's only gotten better recently. In fact, I would say that women's wrestling, while it's still just as good as it was years ago, you're starting to see it get pushed down to the card. They're doing this thing now where, if you watch Royal Rumble or Elimination Chamber, the women's Elimination Chamber or the women's Royal Rumble is first on the card and the men's is last. So you're seeing that constantly. When just a few years ago, you would had one night of WrestleMania that was main evented by two women, which was Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair. And So I'm worried that women's wrestling is getting pushed down to the card. Although having the women first could make sense in the fact that they are putting on such good matches that they're great openers. The Elimination Chamber match with the women, in my opinion, was better than the men's Elimination Chamber match that we watched last night. I just want women's wrestling to be treated in the same way that men's wrestling is, especially when it deserves to be, which it does now. And like you said, these women that we talked about today in these matches were putting on matches that could main event a card, or could main event a pay-per-view. Right. I mean, Nakano and Alundra Blayze was argued by fans. It didn't get it, but it was argued by fans in magazines like PWI to have been the match of the year. That was unusual at this time. That's why we see Nakano and Madusa, Alundra Blayze in the Hall of Fame, is because they put on these defining epic matches. Unfortunately, WCW wasn't able to keep the ball rolling as much, although they did have some good matches like the Akira match, which was great. But, you know, after Madusa retired, women's wrestling kind of dropped down with it. She was carrying, in America, women's wrestling.
Right.
On her shoulders by herself. I mean, with the help of Bull Nakano and with the help of other stars, she was like the Hulk Hogan of women's wrestling at the time. That's the best. I don't know other way to say it. She was like the Rock of women's wrestling.
Yeah.
And I think if it would have been showcased better and treated better, we might have seen a women's revolution a lot earlier than what we did.
Yeah.
But we did, and we're here now. I hope this video gets some attention. I worried because some of the wrestlers we talked about that had the most views or had careers active into the 2000s, which, in fact, I plan for our next video to be about a guy that did have a career in the 2000s, which is Booker T.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm worried that this since Alundra Blayze was not known during the Attitude Era or anything like that, that this video may not get as much recognition. But also, our demographics for this channel are old.
Yeah.
35 to 50.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And I know y'all remember Alundra Blayze.
Yeah.
So if you want to subscribe, but most importantly, like and leave a comment.
Yeah.
And whether you agree with me or disagree with me, leave a comment and like the video if you're seeing this. Help the algorithm and help us talk about how good Madusa and Alundra Blayze was in the 90s.
Yep.
Thank you.